You're listening to Confessions of a Counselor podcast. Here we will talk all things mental wellness.
Hi everyone, it's Janice here and welcome back to Confessions of a Counselor. Today on our episode, I thought that we would talk about rumbling your story. So this is something that Brene Brown talks about in Rising Strong. So if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend you go and check that out. But this is something that I find really essential to the therapy process and something that it took me a long time to be able to actually find the words for when I was communicating with my clients what was essential to creating and seeing change within the therapeutic process. So as always, I'm super grateful for Brene putting words to things in the therapeutic process. So when we talk about rumbling our story, this is really about starting to understand that we live inside of our heads. So our world is perceived through the story that's in our head, right? And we hear this, oh, that's just the story you're telling yourself, or that's just your reality, right? And there's some judgment there that we get in everyday language or everyday talk when we talk about the story that we tell ourselves. But the thing that I really like about how Brene talks about it is that there is no judgment. It's true. We all have a story that's in our head, and we all have a perception of the world. And so the best thing that we can do is understand that story. Understand that I might be coming from this situation differently than the person across from me, and that's okay. It's okay that we're understanding this differently. But if I can understand the biases and I can understand what's going on for me and how I'm understanding this and the stories that I tell myself about people, about things, about the way that I understand the world, then I can start to catch myself when I might be telling myself a story that isn't true. And this is the key piece to therapy, is that oftentimes I'll have clients come into session and say, well, that's just the way it is, or blank is the truth, and have these very concrete beliefs about the world with no wiggle room for the gray area, with no wiggle room that might not actually be true for everyone. And so if we can start to understand that this is the story that we're telling ourselves, then we can start to create change. We can start to create a little bit of gray. We can start to create a belief system that might be slightly different than what we've been either taught to believe, or we've found true through evidence of our life experience. But when we can start to see that there might be a different story out there, then we can start to have empathy for others. We can start to have empathy for ourselves, and we can start to tweak things so that the story that we're telling ourselves feels more comfortable. And so this, I think, is really essential to that therapeutic process of how can I start to break down? How can I start to be self-analytical about what it is that I'm telling myself and start to reframe or change or tweak the story that I'm telling myself? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Confessions of a Counselor podcast is available anywhere you like to listen to your podcast, both on Apple and Android. New episodes will be released every Friday. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to join the conversation. Leave a review or subscribe to the podcast hosted on the Anchor app. All these details can be found at janicelyons.com. Until next time, take care.